The emergency beacon pulsed weakly, a desperate heartbeat against the infinite black of space. Most would have missed it, a tiny, almost imperceptible signal buried in the cosmic background noise. But the galactic peacekeeping vessel Horizon wasn't most ships, and Captain Lyra Entok wasn't most commanders. "Isolate that frequency," she commanded, her four-armed form moving with practiced precision across the bridge. Her species, the Nervari, were known for their computational brilliance, able to process multiple streams of information simultaneously. Where most captains would have ignored such a faint signal, Entok saw possibility. The communications officer, a young Zintok whose body constantly shifted and rippled like living mercury, enhanced the signal. What emerged was less a transmission and more a whisper of survival. Coordinates, a colonial identifier, and something else. A series of encrypted bursts that spoke of something far more complex than a standard distress call. 48 hours. Later they found her. Arya Chen didn't look like a survivor. She looked like a ghost. Pale, thin, her eyes far too old for her 16 years. She sat in the ship's medical bay, wrapped in a thermal blanket that was 3 sizes too large, surrounded by holographic screens displaying her medical readouts. The ship's medical AI was confused, running diagnostic after diagnostic. Her body told a story of impossible survival. Malnutrition markers. Check. Extreme stress indicators. Check. But beneath that, something the medical AI had never encountered before. Her cellular structure showed signs of rapid adaptation that defied every known biological model. Minor injuries were healing at rates that should have been impossible. Her metabolic profile suggested she had survived on less than a tenth of the nutritional intake that would keep most species alive. The medical report would later read like science fiction. 3 days in a ventilation system of a destroyed colonial outpost. Temperatures fluctuating between freezing and near boiling. No consistent food or water source. Constant threat of detection by the raiders who had destroyed her settlement. And she survived. Captain Entok reviewed the initial psych evaluation with growing fascination. Most beings would have been broken, mentally and physically, by such an experience. Arya Chen's psychological profile showed something entirely different. No signs of traditional trauma response, instead, a cold analytical assessment of her survival strategy. "They came at night," Arya had said during her initial interview, her voice flat and matter-of-fact. "Colonial defense was compromised within the first 17 minutes. I evaluated escape routes. The ventilation system provided the highest probability of survival. The raiders were the Kreltak, a mercenary species known for complete planetary strip operations. They didn't just destroy settlements. They methodically eliminated all potential resistance, leaving nothing but scorched earth. Or in this case, scorched atmosphere. Her settlement had been a human frontier colony, remote, underfunded, considered expendable by most galactic powers. The kind of place where survival wasn't just an advantage, it was the only option. When the Galactic Peacekeeping Corps reviewed her case, something unprecedented happened. Her survival wasn't just noted, it was celebrated. The psychological evaluation team, composed of some of the most advanced computational minds in the galaxy, found something remarkable. Arya Chen wasn't a victim. She was a weapon. The Galactic Defense Academy had never admitted a human before. Humans were considered primitive, unpredictable, too emotional, too attached to individual survival to make effective galactic-scale soldiers. But someone saw something different in Arya's file. The recommendation came from an anonymous source, a high-level strategic analyst whose credentials were so classified that even accessing their identity would trigger multiple security protocols. The recommendation was simple and unprecedented. Recommended for extreme conditions training, potential game-changing asset. When the recruitment officer from the Krell Combat Divisions first saw her application, he laughed. A human? In the most advanced military training program in the known galaxy? Impossible. But the laugh died when he saw her evaluation. Her file contained something that made even the most seasoned recruiters pause. Not just her survival story, not just her psychological profile, but a series of notations that suggested something far more intriguing. Potential for unprecedented adaptive response. Computational approach to survival. Zero emotional compromise during extreme stress. The Galactic Defense Academy was about to receive its first human cadet, and the galaxy was about to learn that humanity was nothing like they expected. The Galactic Defense Academy's primary training facility orbited a quantum-unstable neutron star, its massive rotating rings designed to simulate impossible environmental conditions. Each ring represented a different planetary challenge: high-gravity zones, radiation storms, atmospheric compression chambers that could crush most biological entities into microscopic paste. Arya stood at the entrance of Training Complex Omega, surrounded by beings that looked more like living weapons than cadets. The Krell warriors towered like organic tanks, their exoskeletons a living armor that could deflect small-caliber munitions. Zintok shapeshifters rippled and morphed, their cellular structures so adaptable they could redistribute mass to absorb kinetic impacts. Quantum-linked Nervari cadets moved with an eerie synchronization, their neural networks allowing them to predict combat scenarios with mathematical precision. And then, there was Arya. 5'6", 130 pounds, armed with nothing but a standard-issue datapad and a look that could strip paint off battleships. The first module was environmental adaptation. A holographic instructor, a biomechanical construct designed to push biological limits, explained the parameters with clinical detachment. Survival scenarios will test maximum physiological and psychological stress thresholds, the instructor announced. Its voice was a perfect mathematical average of all known galactic communication frequencies. Failure rate is historically 87.3% across all registered species. The first test was deceptively simple: a sealed chamber that would cycle through extreme environmental conditions, temperature from absolute zero to plasma-level heat, atmospheric pressure variations that would liquefy most organic structures, radiation levels that would turn most biological matter into atomic dust. Duration: 72 continuous hours. Most species required extensive technological augmentation to survive such conditions. Specialized environmental suits, cellular regeneration, tanks, neural stabilization implants. Arya had none of these. As the chamber sealed, the other cadets watched with a mixture of curiosity and barely concealed contempt. The betting pool had already started. How long before the human broke? The odds were astronomical, and not in her favor. The first 12 hours were a geological survey of pain. Temperature fluctuations that would have killed most organisms happened in millisecond cycles. Pressure changes that could crush a battleship occurred with mathematical precision. Radiation levels spiked in patterns designed to overwhelm any biological defense mechanism. What the monitoring systems didn't anticipate was Arya's response. Instead of fighting the environmental assault, she began to map it. Each temperature spike, each pressure change, each radiation burst. Her brain wasn't just experiencing the assault, it was categorizing it, understanding it, preparing to survive it. By hour 24, the monitoring team was confused. Her cellular regeneration rates defied every known biological model. Where other species would have been reduced to cellular ash, Arya's body was actively learning, adapting. Her metabolic rate shifted, her cellular structure reconfiguring itself in real time to meet each new environmental challenge. The Nervari neural link observers were the first to notice. Their quantum computational brains could see the micro-adaptations happening at a cellular level. It wasn't just survival. It was evolution happening in real time. "This is impossible," muttered Zarek, the senior xenobiological observer. His species had spent millennia studying adaptive responses across galactic ecosystems. Humans aren't supposed to be able to do this. By hour 48, Arya wasn't just surviving, she was thriving. The chamber that was designed to break her became her laboratory. Each environmental assault was a problem to be solved. Each impossible condition, a mathematical equation to be balanced. When the 72-hour test concluded, the monitoring team was silent. The other cadets stared in disbelief. Arya emerged, tired, slightly pale, but fundamentally unchanged. The official report would later read, "Subject demonstrated unprecedented adaptive response, cellular regeneration and environmental integration beyond current xenobiological understanding." But what it didn't capture was the look in her eyes. Not triumph, not excitement, just cold, calculated assessment. She hadn't just survived the impossible, she had studied it, understood it, prepared to use it. The Galactic Defense Academy had admitted its first human cadet, and they were about to learn that humanity was nothing, like they expected. In the observation room, a single notation was added to her file. Potential threat level, unknown. Combat Simulation Deck. 7 was a marvel of galactic engineering, a holographic training ground that could simulate every known planetary battlefield, every potential combat scenario across 1,000 different worlds. Gravitational anomalies, quantum interference zones, atmospheric conditions that could freeze blood or ignite oxygen. Area was about to become its primary entertainment. The zero-gravity combat practice was designed to be a public execution of human potential. Each cadet would navigate a complex, three-dimensional combat scenario, using a combination of technological augmentation, species-specific biological advantages, and tactical training. The Krell warriors used their multiple limbs to create living weapon platforms. Each appendage could independently target, each movement a choreographed dance of potential violence. Their exoskeletons were living battle computers, processing combat scenarios faster than most species could blink. The Zintok shapeshifters were even more terrifying. They could literally become the environment, redistributing their cellular mass to become living camouflage, weapons, shields. And then there was Arya, standard-issue combat suit. Standard-issue pulse rifle, nothing special. Instructor Karnak, a veteran of 17 interstellar conflicts, made no attempt to hide his contempt. "Observe," he announced to the assembled cadets, "what happens when a species fundamentally misunderstands the art of combat." The simulation began. Arya was immediately ejected from the primary combat zone. One moment she was there, the next, spinning helplessly through the zero-gravity environment. The alien cadets erupted in laughter. The betting pool went crazy. How long before the human was completely eliminated? But something was happening that no one noticed. While spinning, Arya wasn't panicking. She was collecting data. Every rotation, every momentum shift. The physics of zero gravity became her textbook, and she was taking intensive notes. Her pulse rifle, a weapon that had consistently jammed during previous training exercises, became something else entirely in her hands. Not just a weapon. A problem to be solved. By the third simulation rotation, she had identified the fundamental design flaw in the weapon's cooling system, a minor calibration issue that would be invisible to most combat engineers. But to Arya, it was a mathematical equation waiting to be balanced. When the next combat rotation began, something changed. The rifle didn't just fire, it became an extension of her computational thinking. Each shot was a hypothesis, each movement a scientific experiment in applied violence. Instructor Karnak stopped laughing. The weapon modifications were so subtle, so fundamentally elegant, that they defied traditional combat engineering. She hadn't just fixed the rifle, she had reimagined its entire operational concept. Weapons integration became her next crucible. The training module was designed to be comprehensive. Each cadet would be given a standard-issue weapon from their species, Krell plasma cannons that could dissolve armored vehicles, Nervari quantum disruptors that could literally unwind molecular bonds, Zintok organic weapon forms that could reshape themselves in milliseconds. Arya received a standard-issue human pulse rifle, a weapon that, in previous tests, had been nearly useless compared to the alien technologies. But Arya didn't see a weapon. She saw a problem waiting to be solved. While other cadets spent hours learning preset weapon configurations, Arya dismantled her rifle completely, not out of frustration, out of pure scientific curiosity. The Weapons Integration Instructor, a cybernetic construct designed to evaluate technological adaptability, watched in confusion. Most cadets treated their weapons as sacred. Arya treated hers like a mathematical puzzle. By the end of the training cycle, her pulse rifle was no longer just a weapon. It was a computational platform, a living extension of her problem-solving approach to combat. Instructor Zarnak's daily ridicule became a constant backdrop. "Humans are soft," he would announce to the class. "Your species is barely out of your planetary cradle. You lack the evolutionary advantages that make a true warrior." Arya said nothing. She was collecting data. Each moment of humiliation was another data point. Each public failure, another opportunity to understand the system that was trying to break her. The Galactic Defense Academy thought it was testing her limits. In reality, she was testing theirs. And the galaxy was about to discover that humanity's greatest weapon wasn't technology. It was the ability to turn every limitation into an opportunity. The Omega Amphitheater was more than just a training ground. It was a temple of combat, a circular arena designed to showcase the absolute pinnacle of galactic martial capability. Holographic environmental controls could transform the space into any conceivable battlefield, from the crushing gravity wells of neutron star planets to the quantum-shifted combat zones of interdimensional warfare. Today, it would become a proving ground. Instructor Zarnak stood at the center of the arena, a living monument to evolutionary perfection. Standing 3 meters tall, his Krell physiognomy was a masterpiece of biological warfare. Each of his 6 limbs was a potential weapon. His exoskeleton wasn't just armor, it was a living computational matrix that could process combat scenarios faster than most species could draw breath. He had personally crushed entire colonial rebellions, dismantled resistance movements that had taken decades to build. His combat record was legendary, a symphony of violence that had defined interstellar conflict for generations, and today, he would demonstrate why humans had no place in advanced combat training. The betting terminals were already burning up. Every cadet, every instructor, every support staff member had placed their wager. The odds were astronomical, and unanimously against the human. Arya Chen stood opposite him. 5'6", 130 pounds. Looking like she had just stepped out of a high school mathematics class, the arena's environmental controls hummed to life. Gravimetric stabilizers, quantum interference dampeners, holographic threat assessment matrices, everything designed to create the most challenging combat environment imaginable. Zarnak's species had developed combat as a mathematical art form over millennia. Every movement was a calculated equation, every strike, a probabilistic projection of maximum efficiency. When the combat assessment began, most expected a massacre. What happened instead would be remembered as a fundamental redefinition of warfare. The first movement was so fast that the arena's combat recording system struggled to capture it. Zarnak's initial strike, a 6-limbed assault that would have liquefied most biological entities, found nothing but empty space. Arya wasn't just dodging. She was mapping. Each of Zarnak's movements became a data point in her rapidly evolving combat algorithm. Biomechanical stress points, gravitational leverage opportunities, quantum-level computational predictions of potential strike zones. What looked like survival was actually the most advanced real-time combat analysis ever witnessed. The Nervari neural link observers in the observation deck were the first to notice. Their quantum computational brains could see the micro-calculations happening in real time. This wasn't just combat. This was a living, breathing mathematical theorem being solved through motion. Zarnak's 6th strike came with the force of a small gravitational event, a movement designed to crush, to obliterate, to reduce organic matter to its constituent. Adam's area didn't block. She redirected. It was less a martial art and more a physics demonstration. Every ounce of Zarnak's massive force was transformed, redirected, turned against its own momentum. The physics was so elegant, so mathematically perfect that it looked like a magic trick. 9 seconds. That's how long it took to completely dismantle the most feared combat instructor in the galaxy. Not through brute strength, not through technological augmentation, but through a hurricane of calculated violence that looked less like fighting and more like pure weaponized problem-solving. When the dust settled, Zarnak lay motionless, not dead, but comprehensively, mathematically neutralized. The arena was silent. The betting terminals crashed. In the observation deck, the senior strategic analysts looked at each other with a mixture of terror and profound respect. This wasn't just a combat assessment. This was a fundamental reimagining of what combat could be. Arya stood perfectly still. No celebration, no triumph. Just the cold, calculated assessment of a problem that had been comprehensively solved. The official combat report would be classified at the highest levels, but the unofficial whispers would spread like wildfire. The human didn't just win, she rewrote the entire equation of warfare. 9 seconds, that would change everything. The Xenobiological Research Facility orbited a quantum-unstable neutron star, its massive rotating rings designed to contain some of the most dangerous biological anomalies in the known galaxy. Here, species were not just studied. They were dissected, analyzed, and understood at the most fundamental level. Arya Chen became their most fascinating specimen. Dr. Zelna, chief xenobiological researcher for the Galactic Scientific Consortium, had spent 3 centuries studying adaptive biological systems. Her species, the Nervari, were renowned for their computational approach to life sciences. Where most researchers saw a biological sample, Zelna saw living mathematics, complex equations of survival and adaptation, and Arya Chen was breaking every known equation. The initial battery of tests was designed to be comprehensive: cellular, stress simulations, quantum-level genetic mapping, metabolic response tracking that could detect the most minute biological adaptations. What they discovered was nothing short of revolutionary. Humans weren't just survivors. They were living computational platforms. Most species had rigid biological responses. The Krell could withstand extreme gravitational pressures, but only within a narrow band of environmental conditions. The Zintok could reshape their cellular structure, but at the cost of massive energy expenditure. The Nervari could process information at quantum speeds, but their biological systems were fundamentally fragile. Arya's cellular structure told a different story. Her DNA wasn't just a genetic blueprint. It was a living, adaptive algorithm. Each environmental challenge wasn't just survived, it was integrated, learned from, transformed into a new baseline of biological capability. The combat assessment against Zarnak wasn't just a physical victory, it was a biological revolution. Dr. Zelna's research team discovered that Arya's nervous system operated on principles that defied current xenobiological understanding. Where most species had fixed neural pathways, hers were constantly reconfiguring. Each experience became a new computational layer, each challenge an opportunity for biological upgrade. "This is impossible," Dr. Zelna muttered, reviewing the genetic sequencing data. The holographic displays showed cellular adaptations happening in real time. Humans aren't supposed to be able to do this, but the data was irrefutable. Her immune system wasn't just a defensive mechanism. It was a learning network. Exposure to a new pathogen didn't just create antibodies, it created a comprehensive understanding of potential biological threats. Her metabolic rate could shift instantaneously, turning environmental challenges into fuel for adaptation. The psychological evaluation was even more profound. Most species approached challenges with a fixed mindset, predetermined strategies, predictable response patterns. Arya's cognitive approach was something entirely different. Every challenge was a problem to be solved, every limitation an opportunity to innovate. The Galactic Strategic Analysis Division began to take notice. This wasn't just about one exceptional human. This was about the potential of an entire species that had been dramatically underestimated. Preliminary reports suggested that human potential wasn't just biological, it was a fundamental approach to existence that defied traditional evolutionary Models Dr. Zelna's final report was classified at the highest levels, but the preliminary notes were revolutionary. Subject demonstrates adaptive capabilities that suggest a fundamental reimagining of biological potential. Not just survival, not just adaptation, but a living computational approach to existence that transforms challenges into opportunities for growth. The implications were staggering. A species that could learn faster than it could be defeated. A biological system that didn't just resist change, it weaponized it. In the highest levels of Galactic Strategic Command, a new conversation was beginning. Humans weren't just another emerging species. They were a potential game changer in every conceivable theater of conflict. Arya Chen was more than a soldier. She was a living weapon of unprecedented potential. And the galaxy was about to discover that humanity's greatest strength wasn't technological superiority. It was the ability to turn every limitation into an opportunity for unprecedented growth. The final notation on her classified file was both a warning and a promise. Potential threat level, unknown, adaptive potential, infinite. The Stellar Concordance Council Chamber was a marvel of interdimensional architecture. Suspended in a quantum-stabilized void, its meeting hall could simultaneously exist across multiple dimensional planes. Here, the most powerful civilizations in the known galaxy made decisions that could reshape entire star systems. Today's emergency session was different. Representatives from 63 distinct galactic civilizations sat in stunned silence, reviewing classified data that would fundamentally challenge everything they understood about emerging species. Ambassador Carell of the Galactic Strategic Cooperation Board was the first to break the silence. His massive exoskeletal form shifted uncomfortably, the movement betraying a rare moment of uncertainty. One human, he stated, his translation matrix rendering the words with clinical precision, has invalidated nearly 3 centuries of strategic military doctrine. The holographic display showed Arya Chen's combat assessment against Instructor Zarnak. Not just the 9-second takedown, but the comprehensive analysis of her biological and cognitive capabilities. Each replay revealed new layers of complexity that defied conventional understanding. The Nervari computational analysts had spent weeks breaking down the combat footage. What looked like a simple fight was actually a living, breathing mathematical theorem. Every movement was a computational solution. Every dodge, a probabilistic calculation performed faster than most species could comprehend. The Zintok diplomatic corps was particularly intrigued. Their species prided itself on adaptability, on the ability to reshape both body and strategy at a moment's notice. But Arya's approach was something entirely different. Not just adaptation, but a fundamental reimagining of what adaptation could mean. We've been categorizing humans wrong, announced Dr. Zelna, the senior xenobiological researcher presenting the findings. They're not a primitive species. They're a computational platform disguised as a biological organism. The strategic implications were profound. Humanity had been classified as a Type 0 civilization, barely capable of interstellar communication, let alone significant galactic influence. Most advanced species viewed humans as potential resources at best, and potential problems at worst. That assessment was about to change dramatically. The classified reports revealed something far more interesting. Humans weren't just survivors. They were living solutions to problems most species hadn't even identified yet. Their technological progression wasn't linear. It was exponential and unpredictable. Where most species developed technology through careful measured research, humans seemed to innovate through a combination of desperate necessity and almost reckless creativity. The quantum predictive algorithms, the most advanced strategic projection systems in the galaxy, were failing spectacularly when trying to model human potential. Arya Chen's combat assessment had introduced a variable that broke every existing mathematical model. We need a new classification, argued Ambassador Talon of the Interstellar Research Consortium. Our current systems can't process this level of adaptive potential. The most radical proposal came from an unexpected source. The Krell Military Strategic Command, The same species that had previously dismissed humans as irrelevant now proposed a complete re-evaluation of human potential. Their recommendation was simple and unprecedented: immediate elevation to emerging adaptive species status. A classification reserved for civilizations that demonstrated potential for rapid, unpredictable evolution. But it was more than just a military assessment. The diplomatic implications were even more profound. A species that could adapt this quickly wasn't just a potential military asset. They were a fundamental unknown, a wild card that could reshape galactic dynamics in ways no one could predict. Arya Chen had become more than an individual. She was a living proof of concept, a demonstration that humanity was something far more complex than anyone had understood. The final recommendation was carefully worded, but revolutionary. Subject demonstrates adaptive capabilities that suggest a fundamental reimagining of species potential. Recommended immediate comprehensive research initiative, potential game-changing asset to galactic stability. As the council session concluded, one thing became abundantly clear. The galaxy had underestimated humanity, and humanity was about to make them pay attention. The final notation on the classified report was both a warning and a promise. Humanity. Potential threat level: unknown adaptive potential infinite. The quantum interference zone was where physics went to die, a region of space where conventional laws of matter, energy, and causality broke down into something more akin to a mathematical nightmare. 3 previous special operations teams had entered. None had returned. Computational models predicted a 99.99997% fatality rate for any intervention. They sent Arya Chen by. The mission briefing was classified at the highest levels. A deep space research station had gone dark, but dark didn't begin to describe the anomaly. Quantum entanglement readings suggested the station wasn't just silent. It was existing in multiple simultaneous states of destruction and non-destruction. Her team was a carefully curated collection of the galaxy's most advanced operatives: a Nervari quantum computational specialist, a Zintok shapeshifter with unprecedented adaptive capabilities, a Krell combat engineer whose technological integration made her more machine than organic, and Arya Chen, the human wildcard. The insertion vehicle was anything but standard. A quantum-phased stealth craft that could simultaneously exist and not exist, its hull constructed from materials that defied traditional understanding of matter. Most species would require extensive neural augmentation just to prevent their minds from fragmenting during transit. Arya required nothing more than a standard-issue neural stabilization band. As they approached the interference zone, the first signs of dimensional stress began to manifest. Reality itself seemed to become fluid. Computational systems began to fail. The Nervari specialist, whose neural networks could typically process quintillions of calculations per second, started to experience system-wide cascading failures. Arya was taking notes. Where most operatives saw chaos, she saw a problem waiting to be solved. Each dimensional fluctuation became a data point, each reality breach, a mathematical equation to be balanced. The first breach occurred 17 minutes into the mission. The Zintok shapeshifter simply ceased to exist. One moment present, the next, gone. Not dead, not destroyed, simply removed from observable reality. The mission parameters would have broken most teams. Lose a primary operative. Enter a zone where physics itself became unpredictable. Face a threat that had already consumed multiple special operations teams, Arya recalculated. Her approach wasn't tactical in any traditional sense. She wasn't fighting the dimensional instability. She was negotiating with it. Each movement became a quantum probability calculation. Each decision a multi-dimensional chess move that existed simultaneously across multiple potential realities. The research station appeared and did not appear. Quantum mechanics suggested it was both destroyed and intact, existing and not existing. A paradox made physical. Arya saw something different. She saw a problem of information, of computational complexity, of understanding the underlying mathematical structure that bound these contradictory states together. The mission objective was simple: retrieve critical research data that could prevent a galactic-scale catastrophe. The computational models suggested it was impossible. They didn't know Arya Chen. Her first move was to create a quantum stabilization field using nothing more than the team's existing equipment and her own understanding of the underlying physical principles. It wasn't technology. It was applied mathematics taken to its most extreme conclusion. The Krell combat engineer watched in stunned silence as Arya essentially rewrote the fundamental rules of dimensional interaction, where previous teams had been torn apart by quantum stress. Arya was having a conversation with the fundamental nature of reality itself. 47 minutes into the mission, she retrieved the data package. 52 minutes into the mission, she stabilized the entire quantum interference zone, a feat that would have been considered impossible by every known scientific model in the galaxy. When they returned, the mission report was classified at the highest levels. The official documentation was less than a page long. But the unofficial whispers would echo through every strategic command center in the galaxy. The human didn't just complete the mission. She redefined what a mission could be. The final notation on her mission report was both a warning and a promise. Mission: status impossible, objective achieved, operative assessment, beyond classification. The Galactic Convergence Summit was unlike any diplomatic gathering in known history. 63 civilizations, thousands of delegates, and at the center of it, all a single human who had become more than just a soldier, more than just a strategic asset, a living redefinition of potential. Arya Chen stood before the assembled representatives, not as a conquering hero, not as a military prodigy, but as something far more dangerous. A living demonstration of humanity's true nature. The summit had been called to address the most significant threat the galaxy had ever encountered: the nullifiers, a quantum-level machine intelligence that had been systematically eliminating biological civilizations for millennia. An enemy so advanced, so fundamentally alien, that most species had simply accepted extinction as an inevitability. Humanity had other plans. The presentation was less a military strategy and more a comprehensive reimagining of conflict itself. Where previous civilizations had approached the nullifiers with conventional warfare, Arya demonstrated something entirely different. Her solution wasn't a weapon, it was a conversation. The holographic displays showed a computational approach so complex, so fundamentally innovative, that it made previous strategic models look like children's mathematics. She wasn't proposing to fight the nullifiers. She was proposing to understand them, to communicate with them at a level that transcended traditional conflict. The Nervari computational specialists were the first to recognize the true brilliance of her approach. What looked like a military strategy was actually a comprehensive linguistic and computational framework that could potentially transform an enemy into something else entirely. Dr. Zelna, the senior xenobiological researcher who had first studied Arya, leaned forward. Her quantum computational brain was working overtime, processing the implications of what she was witnessing. "This isn't just a solution," she muttered. "This is a fundamental reimagining of conflict resolution." Arya's strategy drew from humanity's most unique characteristic, not technological superiority, but an unprecedented capacity for adaptation, empathy, and innovative problem-solving. The nullifiers weren't just an enemy to be destroyed. They were a complex system to be understood, transformed, potentially even integrated. Each delegate received a comprehensive analysis that rewrote everything they understood about warfare, conflict resolution, and interspecies communication. It wasn't a battle plan. It was a blueprint for a new type of galactic interaction. The Krell military strategists, who had once dismissed humans as irrelevant, now looked at Arya with a mixture of terror and profound respect. She had done something they had never considered possible. She had turned an existential threat into a potential opportunity for communication. As the presentation concluded, the summit hall was silent. This wasn't just about saving civilizations from the nullifiers. This was about fundamentally transforming how civilizations understood themselves, their conflicts, and their potential for growth. The final strategic recommendation was both simple and revolutionary. Humanity represents a new paradigm of species. Potential, not through technological dominance, not through military superiority, but through an unprecedented capacity to transform challenges into opportunities for collective growth. Arya wasn't just representing humanity, she was demonstrating a new way of existing in the universe. The 9-second takedown against Zarnak seemed like a lifetime ago. That moment had been about individual potential. This was about something far greater, a species that didn't just survive, a species that transformed, species that saw every limitation as an opportunity for unprecedented innovation. As the summit concluded, the galaxy understood something profound. Humanity wasn't just another emerging civilization. They were a fundamental force of nature. Its final notation in the official galactic records was both a warning and a promise. Humanity, potential threat level, transcendent adaptive potential. Infinite, and somewhere, in the vast darkness between stars, something was listening. Something was learning, something was changing.